welcome to the Center for Unity and Diversity's second roundtable for 2019. And our topic for discussion is identity politics in the 2019 elections and implications for South Africa. My name is Adenauer, and I'm the Senior Fellow at the Foundation. About 8 weeks ago, whoa, that's quite loud. About 8 weeks ago, the country turned up at the polls, albeit in smaller numbers. In the run-up to the elections, I have written a number of pieces anticipating how, for example, youth will vote. In Coming of Age, Why the Youth Vote Matters, and Moving the Needle, the Youth Vote in South Africa, I attempted, perhaps to convince myself, that this constituency will see the wisdom of not foregoing the opportunity to participate in a democratic process, and will grapple with the dangers of not participating in deepening and thickening our constitutional democracy. We now know that too many young people stayed away and opportunity was lost. In addition to a collective concern about the youth vote and an overall lower voter turnout, there emerged in the tallying of numbers distinct voter behaviors, with many voters doing so along racial lines. In a post-election article, and one that directly influenced the choice of subject for this roundtable, I grappled with the following. With a large menu of 48 political parties, why did large numbers of South Africans vote along racial lines, or did they? And perhaps our speakers are going to disprove that. This, even though most parties contesting elections emphasized their non-racial and inclusive character, other than the BLF, of course, and they got too few votes. Does that say something? The EFF received most votes from black voters, and the DA, mainly black, the EFF was mainly black, and the DA was mainly white, ANC was mainly black, and Patricia de Lille's Good Party peeled away some support from the DA, particularly of the coloured vote. The ANC's got its vote, we now know that. And I think the question is, 25 years later, are these patterns stuck? Is this what it's going to be? That people, when they turn out at the polls, will do so bearing in mind identity politics, and how is identity defined in contemporary South Africa? I would like to briefly outline the structure of our debate, our discussions here, because I was perhaps in some way thinking that our speakers today will reinforce what many of us believe post the election, that people voted in a particular way for very particular reasons, and race dominated. As we were chatting before our discussions, I think we came up with a variety of thoughts on why that might not be so. And I look to being challenged, to have my own views challenged as well. And I'm hoping that we're going to have a really, really robust discussion. We have a great slate of speakers before us. But before we do that, and certainly before I introduce any of the speakers to my right, I want to call on Mr. Christian Enders, who's a friend and a colleague and a supporter of these roundtable discussions. And Christian will talk a little bit more about the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, why they support such discussions, their interest in these discussions, and I'm very glad that you're able to make it. It's really one of your first discussions with the CUD, so very, very warm welcome, Christian.
Thank you, Zora. Yes, so I'm with the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, and we are hosting an event tonight with the CUD. And I'm delighted that we could be a part of an event like this with such distinguished speakers, and also on a topic which is so extremely topical at the moment, not just in South Africa, but I think wider as well. Quickly, some brief words about the Adenauer Stiftung or Foundation. Konrad Adenauer was the first Chancellor of West Germany after the war, and he played a Mandela-like role in Germany after the war and the Nazi atrocities linked to the Holocaust. Amongst other things, during his time the German Constitution was written. And the German Constitution was written with the intention of avoiding the structural factors that could allow a man-made disaster like the Holocaust to happen again. In 1955, so a couple of years after the German Constitution was written, the Adenauer Stiftung, not yet in that name, was founded. And the idea was that democracy doesn't happen by itself, and it's not something that happens because you declare it on a document. It's something that requires fostering and feeding and work. And so the Adenauer Stiftung, followed shortly afterwards by other political foundations, made it their work to educate German citizens in democracy. Because there's nothing natural about democracy. And to this date, this is the main function of the Adenauer Stiftung. Last year, they had 2,500 events in Germany in which 145,000 people participated. So democracy in Germany remains a work in progress. And the same applies in South Africa. The reason why the Germans are here is because the moral imperative of fostering democracy doesn't stop at borders. Germany learned very harshly what the effect can be if you start to relate to people as an identity rather than as individuals. Because an identity is a thing, and a thing you can't destroy. But an individual has a voice, and a voice you can speak to, and when you speak to someone, it's very difficult to harm that person. So I'm very excited about this evening's presentations because we had effectively, what to me, in my origin story in Johannesburg, a typical South African moment where people from different backgrounds with robust humor engaged with each other and made fun of each other and teased each other. And as a consequence, we're able to overcome the differences in background. And I think that's more of what we're going to hear tonight. I expect some very lively debate. And I'm hoping very much that this will inform us further at a time when I think all of us are feeling analysis fatigue after the election. Because every day there's more election analysis. But today, I think we've got the quality on the panel that this is not going to be the same as we've heard before. So thank you very much, and please visit Kas.de or speak to me after the event if you'd like to find out more about the Adenauer Stiftung. Thank you very much. Sorry.
Thank you, Christian. Between us, we had a hasty discussion about the order of speakers and decided that what we will do is we will start with Sanusha Naidu, followed by Reza, who's a little bit of a veteran now with the CUD, and a new friend, Berkowitz. So let me introduce Sanusha to you. Sanusha, I will just have to find that Sanusha. That's terrible. Well, you know, many of us, I know Sanusha for decades, and Sanusha has an interest in the main in political economy, and over the last couple of years has been providing very robust political analysis in the media in particular. Sanusha works for the IGAD, is Institute for Global Dialogue. And Sanusha has been thinking about elections and analyzing statistics and figures and providing analysis. And I'm hoping that Sanusha will do the sort of the big picture analysis, and then we will whittle down through Reza's work and then followed by Paul. But I'll introduce each speaker subsequently. So Sanusha, it's all yours.
Thank you, Zora, again. It's wonderful to be here on a very cold evening, the storm emerging in Cape Town. But I was a bit disappointed I missed the previous roundtable with Reza and Konrad, because I thought that it was a very good primer for the way in which we need to think about elections. Just to pick up on some of the points that Zora raised regarding my interest in elections, and particularly in the South African context. I do feel quite old because you said we know each other for decades. I know you when you were in school and I was still small. So it kind of feels like we're getting to a very, very interesting point in terms of our journey through this history of our transition, but more importantly, the electoral landscape. And essentially, it came out of an article that the Vice Chancellor of Wits, Adenauer, who was a lecturer of mine at the University of Durban West School, thought about in 1999 around this idea that people vote in homogeneous blocks. That there's this there's an Indian vote and there's a colored vote. And we were sitting, and I was a very junior lecturer, and he was very senior at the time, and we were sitting and discussing this. And we were asking the question is, do people vote in blocks? Do they vote on the basis that they look at their identity in the context of whether it's race or whether it's the kind of subgrouping of being a minority, and this is how they will vote? And the reason why we asked the question was because we were trying to understand why the ANC's campaign was so much about culture with the Indian community and not about bread and butter issues around poverty, around unemployment, around material conditions and living standards. And the idea was quite interesting because we did a bit of a, and I'm not an indicators person, I'm very much qualitative as opposed to quantitative, but we tried to look at household and incomes around, at the time, 1999, 2,500 was the benchmark of household income. And we found one particular trend that was very interesting, which was also anomalous at the same time. And that is people earning in the threshold of 2,500 or below, and it's by no means methodologically proven or whatever, but I think we can draw from it in terms of what some of the broad narratives were. And that is, they were not voting for the ANC, despite the ANC's ideological dispensation being the emancipation of the working class, and that their policies were around poverty reduction, around what the working class would say in terms of aligning to the ANC. In the Indian community, they were aligning to the DA. In the Khalid community, it was a similar pattern. The class dynamic was quite interesting when you looked at the middle class in the Indian and Khalid communities. They were voting ANC, whereas in the African community, it was across the board. And for me, Ed and I phrased the article in Politico, which we used, and we got a lot of flack for it. At the time, people were saying to us, "You don't understand this. It's not about class, it's about race." And this brings me to the first narrative that we've had to deal with in South Africa, which you raised in your introduction, Zora, and that is the race census argument of how much our identity politics are informed by the fact that race plays a single preponderant role in the way that people will vote and will continue to vote. And our argument was essentially, you can't just place race as the dynamic. It has to be the intersection between race and class. And that, for those of us who remember Marxist debates, etc., and looked at South Africa in the 80s as colonial neoliberalism of a special time. These were some of the debates were coming out. So that was my first point when I thought about this topic, and I went back to the article. And I still go back and read it and sometimes think about what we were trying to say here. But I think it takes us on a journey in terms of how much the race census argument was prevalent and perhaps more relevant then because of the dynamics that came out in terms of the transition. And the question we asked ourselves is, why would the Indian working class not vote for the ANC? Because they're talking the same policy in the election manifesto. They're talking about access, they're talking about economic and material conditions. And it became very interesting because at the time, affirmative action wasn't being applied in the way that it is being applied now, but people felt that they were being compromised at the bottom end of the economic ladder. So if you were in the service industry and you were working as a waiter or in the textile industry in terms of your position, you were being cut off because you were saying, well, affirmative action is being applied at the lower end of the economic scale, and at the top end of the skills scale, the lawyers, the teachers, etc., were enjoying the skills that they brought to the economy, to society, and so forth. And that anomaly was very interesting for us. Of course, political parties knew that. They were clever. There were very interesting strategies, and the one that I remember very clearly was the Democratic Party, not the Democratic Alliance, the Democratic Party, led by Tony Leon, which essentially had a very interesting campaign, which was then used again in 2019, but in a very different way, called Fight Back. And that Fight Back campaign was interpreted fight back against who and what and against what. So this again comes back to my second point, and that is, have we seen the class census argument become more prevalent at the 2019 election? Have people been able to transcend the question of, I'm looking at political parties not on the basis of just race, but what do they talk about in terms of my material standards, my conditions and improvement of livelihood? And I suspect we will never get around or totally remove ourselves from the race census argument. It will always have an underlying nuance to the way people look at political parties. Because one of the things that I found very interesting in this election was looking at the election manifestos of the top three parties. I mean, they did, especially the ANC and the DA, never said anything different about the economy. It wasn't about having radical approaches to the economy. And I think Reza will talk more about that. I don't want to approach it this time. But if I take the area of foreign policy, which is the other area that I'm engaged in, all big political parties talked about border management. Keep the migrants out. We need better border management. And that is very interesting as well. So if you start to unpack and disaggregate the behavior of the electorate, I think we see these two views around the race census argument, the class census argument, coming together, featuring in the way that perhaps the 10 million plus people didn't go out and register to vote. And of course, the other interesting aspect of that for me is if we are profiling political parties according to the kinds of voters that they will attract, then the 10 million people that didn't go out to vote, of which a substantial number were people under the age of 30, the EFF didn't really get them out to the voting stations to register. And that for me is where did this 1.9 million extra votes or 2 million votes came from in terms of the EFF. But I think what is important here is we have an astute electorate, and that 37-point-something billion people are understanding the issues based on, they may not be reading the election manifesto like us and interpreting it and disaggregating it and going through a whole kind of rigorous analysis of it, but they understand about the issues that are affecting them in terms of material processes, access to services, and of course have their lives improved over the last, let's leave the last 25 years, let's take the last 10 years as a benchmark. We saw this in 2016 in the local government election. We saw how people actually used that space to demonstrate their dissatisfaction, whether they voted for the ANC or they didn't vote for the ANC, or they went and they used their vote as a to me, I think both arguments are beginning to converge. I think that you can't separate the race argument, but neither can you downplay the class dynamic, because there are serious issues in terms of how people are conceptualizing policy, and whether policy is talking to them in terms of whether it's the fees must fall. I had a student today say to me that they have to basically wait 2 years before they can make an application to university, and whether the state is delivering on those dynamics. And this generation that's coming through, I think, are not necessarily beholden to the kinds of traditional politics of the ANC as being the liberator or whatever, but they are now much more about the policy, the material issues, and so forth. And so, to answer Zora's question, I think, are we seeing a static kind of prevalence around the race census argument? I think the millennial generation is moving beyond the race census argument because it's about material circumstances. And whether these trends can conform to international trends, I think would be interesting in terms of what Paul and Reza provide us with the numbers and so forth. But just to also add, the other question that this election opened up for me personally was to also try and think about the ideological spectrum in terms of how do we place political parties and whether the electorate has that kind of sophisticated or sees the ideological spectrum in that way. And to a large extent, I think what we are seeing is people understanding, what's the word? It's not this or that, it's the economy, stupid. It's not working. It's not getting to the point where it's delivering on the jobs. It's not delivering on, today somebody goes to buy electricity, it's a 44% tariff on the purchase of electricity, which is really hard on those income level houses that are below the poverty data line, who are struggling at the margins. So I think people have become really clear about what their expectations are, what their interests are, and where the political parties are driving that. Now, there could be a popularist insert into all of this in terms of who says, I'm going to talk about the land issue, I'm going to talk about these questions around the economy, I'm going to deliver on this. But between the two big parties, there's no difference in the economy, in the economic policy making. There's nothing in terms of that. For the EFF, the question is how would you change the structural conditions of society in order to integrate into a world where you can't exist without investment. You can't have those drivers come in. But the big challenge is people have felt the impact of non-performing policy. They felt the impact of what has been poverty, inequality, and unemployment, the triple dilemma. They've experienced real crisis in their livelihoods, and so they expressed it in the election. Just to end on this idea, and perhaps to open up the debate, is whether or not we're moving towards an electorate that's much more concerned about issues as opposed to, I vote for this party because they talk to me in the basis of race identity. Maybe identity will never get around the identity. There'll be several identities people will have when they go to the polling booth. We can't ignore that. But perhaps the issues and the way the issues are stacked at the moment, and just taking our cue from President Ramaphosa's State of the Nation address last week, I think it tells you that you can't afford to just think that people are going to do the normal and the status quo will continue, because I don't see it continuing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sanusha. I think you've given us much to chew on, and we're going to come back to these issues when we've heard our other two speakers. Our next speaker is Reza Omar. Reza is the Strategic Research Director at Citizen Surveys and has been and continues to focus his research on social political research for government, academic institutions, and international development agencies. Reza has done large-scale surveys, tracking surveys, has provided insights into various dimensions of the lives of South Africans as citizens, consumers, and voters. And Reza, at the last roundtable discussion earlier this year, you provided us with fascinating detail about what people were thinking about in the trenches. And that's the level at which citizen survey penetrates. And we don't necessarily get enough of that in the metadata. So we certainly look forward to hearing a little bit more post the election, your analysis. Thank you.
I prefer to stand. So, citizen surveys implements the South African citizen survey. It's a massive undertaking.
I know, but Megan's recording. Can you pick it up? You need a mic.
It should be okay.
Okay.
So this is what we do. It's our investment in democracy because we believe that everybody has the right to have their voices heard. We apply the same level of rigor as Statistics South Africa uses to gather official statistics. That is what is necessary in order to be able to talk about South Africa as a whole. This is just to show you the parts of South Africa we've been to gather people's opinions. We go everywhere, from the cities into the deep rural areas of South Africa, through all the towns, and each little dot represents a place where we interviewed 4 South Africans. When you do it correctly, then you can talk about the opinions of everybody here. So I want to start off by talking about the circumstances, long-term circumstances, the things that really matter to South Africans. So we asked South Africans, do you think the country's heading in the right direction? From 2016, there's been a general trend. When we became aware of the first state capture report, you can see the drop in what people believed. The country was no longer heading in the right direction. It plummeted when the Midnight Massacre, when President Gordon as Minister of Finance was sacked by Zuma. That is the lowest point in the entire 25 years of South African democracy. It rose as President Ramaphosa ascended. South Africans were looking. We needed an alternative to the Zuma period. We realized things are going very badly. And that was the height of Ramaphosa. And then we started becoming aware of the actual depth of state capture. The Commission of Inquiry. Then President Ramaphosa commits to dealing with corruption. And we become a little bit more optimistic about what's happening. And then stage 4 load shedding. And we realize the sheer volume of money that was stolen from Eskom. When the lights went off, people realized what state capture actually was. Now we ask the question, Eskom, how much trust do you have in Eskom? And we observed for many years it was sitting around 56%. In January it was still 56%. February, load shedding started. March, it drops significantly, and in April, it drops to 35%. That's the lowest ever. Now, load shedding adversely impacted significantly on voter turnout and the electoral performance of the ANC. We watched it drop. As the lights went out, blame was ascribed to the leadership at Eskom and the ANC and government. What was interesting is President Ramaphosa was not blamed for this. However, the credibility of the party suffered dramatically, and it had its ultimate impact on voter turnout and the ANC's vote. Now we ask the question, in your opinion, is the level of corruption in South Africa increasing, staying the same, or decreasing? Well, in April As soon as President Ramaphosa was explaining that SEOs were sewers of corruption, it starts to climb. The Merging Commission, the Zondo Commission, and come December, it hits 81%. These are real issues to people. And it covers all South Africans. Share a common sentiment. President Ramaphosa, in his sona in February, commits. He says he's committing to bring the perpetrators of state capture to justice. He makes us that promise. And now we believe, okay, things are going to get somewhat better here. Then the lights go out. And we realize, no, this isn't working out. Now, just on the lights going out, realize that in quarter 1 of 2019, the economy contracted 3.2%, minus 3.2%. The last time it did this was in the 2008 financial crisis. And we haven't had a credit bubble explode yet. Unemployment, 237,000 jobs also were lost. That's people's lived circumstances. Now do realize that every job supports maybe 4, 5 people in a household and people that people are close to. So how many households were impacted upon by the loss of 250,000 jobs or so? Or multiply by 5, 1.25 million people or so fell. Downward social mobility is the order of the day. There's no more upward social mobility. We ask people, and this is all South Africans, in your opinion, what are the 3 most important problems facing South Africa? 73%, 27.5 million out of the 37.8 million adult South Africans says unemployment, followed by crime, corruption, poverty, and destitution. These are the big issues. These are the things that affect people's material circumstances, the quality of life that they experience. And these are real issues. And people tell us, poverty and destitution, housing, water supply, education, roads, electricity, economic inequality, basic health, management of the economy. Look how low xenophobia. Second, third from the bottom. Discrimination and racism, second from the bottom. That gives you a sense of how important people think this is as a problem. What is important is that crime, corruption, poverty, and destitution. Now, this is a very particular kind of analysis. And it tries to understand which political, and we ask the question, which political party is best at? And we go through the 10 most important problems facing South Africa. And what we observe is that ANC is most closely associated with service delivery items, maintaining roads, providing water, providing houses. Now, do realize that after a quarter century in state, that's what they've been doing. The EFF is associated with reducing corruption. But think about what they've been doing over the last 3 years. Every time there was a court issue, they would be out there in their red overalls protesting. Many, many times. So people began to come to associate them with corruption. The DA has no position. They are associated with nothing. There's no strong position there. But consider, their policy person, when after she resigned, what did she say? Policy crisis in the DA. And as my colleague said, is there a real difference between the pro-business investment ANC manifesto, just like the public, and the way that Ramaphosa speaks from the DA? Consider if the text of the February sona was read by Musi Neymani, wouldn't that be credible? There isn't much of a difference between the DA's positioning and the pro-business wing of the ANC. Now I'm going to explain the political taxonomy of South Africa. The EFF are left-wing populists. That's where they fall on the spectrum of left-wing and right-wing. Similar to the South American left-wing popularists. The ANC is centrist, but the ANC has two factions. There's the left-wing popularist faction, which was led by Zuma, and the right-wing pro-business faction, which is led by Ramaphosa. Now, just something about the political history of the ANC. Mbeki was the right wing of the ANC. Zuma was the left-wing popularist side of the ANC. And now, Ramaphosa is the right wing of the ANC. That's where he fits. Now, the DA sits to the right of the ANC. And what happened with the and the FF plus sits on the right of the DA. So now you can get a spectrum. Left, popularist, EF. Centrist, ANC, in two factions. Right, DA. Right of DA, far right, FF plus. Now let's understand the class dynamics that play themselves out. We spoke about 250,000 jobs being lost. The economy at the time, young people coming into the working age population, 150,000. That is what happens every single quarter. New entrants into the labor force is 150,000 people. Add 250,000 plus 150,000 for the first 3 months of this year. South Africa is minus 400,000 jobs. And remember, what is the most important issue? And that is only spoken to white people, black people, that's everybody. Now I'm going to take where? So now we understand the political taxonomy. As the economy contracts, the working class swings hard to the left. That is the nature of the working class. The affluent and the businesses, corporations, like those who negotiated the settlement in 1990 or so. Pro-business sits on the right. What happened? Working class shifted to the left, the EFF picked up some of those votes. The ANC, centrist right, well, Ramaphosa helped them get an extra 650,000 votes. The DA, the right wing of the DA fractures off and winds up in the FF plus. That's how it played itself out. Now let's take and remember, we looked at land expropriation. And the reason I want to show you land expropriation is because of identity politics. To what extent do you agree or disagree that government has the right to take land without payment and redistribute it to people who are disadvantaged under apartheid? Strongly agrees 28%, this is imported to 2018, and strongly disagrees 31%. In quarter 3, it turns into 33% strongly agree, 35% strongly disagree. Can you see how this splits the nation in two? But how does it play out in terms of identity? Well, we profiled those who strongly will, well, we did both, but I'm going to show you one of them. So this feels closest to the party, and it's a measure of what we refer to as partisanship. Look at what it does. 12.5 million cuts the ANC clean in half. The DA, yes, we expect the pro-business anti-land expropriation component, but look at that. Nearly 50% of DA partisans agree or strongly agree. And the EFF we expect, but a quarter of them strongly disagree. What does this mean? Well, we profile them out. Now, there are biases. We saw biases. But let's look at it overall. 8.5 million Africans, 1.8 million colors, 400, and this is those who strongly strongly disagree. Look at the majority of strongly disagree. In sheer numbers of people, 8.5 million Africans strongly disagreed. What does that mean? We expect this. 1.8 million, 1.1 million. Sure, there's biases, but let's look at the quantum of people we're talking about. Look at this. 25 to 34 is 27%, but it's pretty much equally split across all age groups. It's across all. Livingston's measure is a measure of affluence. It's across all measures of affluence, including, this is the poor, that is the working class over there, that is the middle class, the low middle class, and the upper middle class. Does identity come out here? Sure, there's biases, but what do you think? 35% of the country, across the country, metro, land expropriation in metro areas, rural areas. Well, do you know what people are talking about? Housing. That's what it means. And housing, if we just flip back for a moment, look at these things: unemployment, crime, corruption, poverty, destitution, housing. What happens if you don't have a job? Well, then crime goes up in where you live. That's a natural phenomenon. Corruption is a special case. But if you don't have a job, won't you experience poverty and destitution? And, you know, living in shacks is a very undignified existence. These are the issues facing South Africans as a whole. I agree with my colleague. Class trumps race. It trumps religion. It trumps ethnicity. Sure, there are biases. Sure, there's partisan identification that has stretched a long time. But class is now beginning to dominate. The youth are unwilling to accept their circumstances. A quarter of a century later, they grew up under the ANC. They were promised the better. Their parents were promised the better life. And what has materialized for them? Nothing. The future has failed the youth. Now consider the vote. Just my last one. Consider the actual vote in actual numbers. 37.8 million adult South Africans, 18 years and older. Nearly 38 million. How many votes do you think the EFF got? 1.9 million. What is 1.9 million out of 38 million? Seriously? Do they have broad-based support? The DA got around 3.5 million. 3.5 million out of 38 million. Do they have broad-based support? The ANC got 10.5 million votes out of 38 million people. Do they have broad-based support? Those who came out to the polls, only 47% of South Africans. The way South Africans voted was through abstinence. They just didn't go. This brings into question the legitimacy of the South African democracy. The future has failed the youth. The youth are not going to stand by. Like President Ramaphosa said, 2 million jobs, 10 years. No, that's unacceptable. In 10 years' time, the youth population, there will be 6 million more. What is he talking about? For 2/3 of them, poverty and destitution. The youth are not going to accept this. The state, and I'm not talking about the ANC, DA, EFF, the state as a whole. The youth, what do they think of the state? That it has failed. We are in for an interesting time. And it is class, not just ethnicity, that is guiding our way to the future.
Reza, as always, thank you very much for that input, and no doubt it's given people much food for thought. Our final speaker for this evening is Paul Berkowitz, and Paul is analyst and a writer. In 2015, he founded EGIS, a geospatial research company specializing in economic and development data. The company has clients including National Treasury, the OSF, and top JSE-listed companies. Paul writes frequently and has done so since the 2011 local government elections. And you write for the Mail and Guardian, Business Day, Daily Maverick. And you've done some really good stuff for the 2019 elections, Paul, for both TISO and SABC. I'm an avid follower of Paul's tweets, particularly over the elections. Paul, I look forward to hearing your piece, and then we will have time to interrogate these after your input. So, over to you.
Thanks very much, sir. Can everyone hear me? All right. It's always difficult to go last, especially after such august company. But it's fine. I'm quite happy being the light relief and the comedy part of the show. I have a very short presentation. It's not, in terms of the slide pack, I don't know if that's... Okay. Right. So what I've got here is just 4 disparate maps from... All right. It's going to be 4 disparate maps taken over, as Zora said. These are maps that have been made since 2011. They look at various electoral results over those elections that have been held since 2011. And in fine postmodern self-referential style, they say as much about the map maker as they do about the state of our politics. You'll see that there's some disjointed evolution of the maps. As we progress chronologically, they get a little bit better. For now, they're a little ephemeral, they float. There's no context, there's no, they're literally untethered. So I'll go through them quickly. This is a map of the ward results for the 2011 municipal elections in the city of Joburg Metro. I was still using yellow for the ANC, blue for the DA, and since the FF wasn't around, there's one solitary ward for the IFP. This is the interesting ward. It's in an area of Johannesburg called Denver, which is hostile country, which is migrant labor, mining labor, and at that point in 2011, the IFP still had a geographical presence. They don't anymore. Next slide, please. Okay. This was the EFF's first foray. This is for the 2014 national provincial elections. This is in Ekurhuleni, but specifically the northwestern part of Ekurhuleni, covering mostly the township of Tembisa. Again, a bit untethered and unworded, so I apologize for that. But what we're looking at here, down to the voting district level, is a range of electoral successes for the EFF, everywhere from almost none of the vote up to in excess of 40% on a concentrated geographic level. And what was very interesting at this point was there was a very high correlation between the home language of voters and the support for the EFF. Specifically, the percentage of voters by voting district whose home language, whose mother tongue was Nguni groups, meaning Sesotho, Setswana, and Sepedi. And we're going to come back to that when we talk about 2019. Next slide, please. Okay, now there's context. There's the Indian Ocean. Okay, what you're looking at here is the IFP's share of the municipal vote, specifically in KZN. We've moved away from that single solitary ward in Johannesburg, which the IFP did not retain in 2016, by the way. And what you see here, very largely concentrated geographic support for the IFP in the northern half of the province. That very dense, dark red area is Ulundi, in the central northern part of the province. That's the IFP's traditional stronghold, but there are other areas as well. Last slide. And here's the Freedom Front Plus with the surprise. I'd like to say dark horse, but that metaphor seems to break down almost immediately. Horse of a different color. The Freedom Front Plus, the runners-up after the EFF in terms of who were the winners of the 2019 national provincial elections. This is looking at the 2014 vote by way of historic comparison. And the contrast between this map and the previous one is that the Freedom Front Plus support is geographically dispersed. And we're going to talk about that. Okay. That's the last slide. Yeah, my stock in trade is pretty pictures. And everyone loves a good map. So I want to start with the central premise after giving you some varied maps, which will come back to what's the significance and what's the importance. The narrative of this election was that the EFF and the Freedom Front Plus were winners, the ANC and the DA were the losers, the extreme left and extreme right, to use Reza's taxonomy, did well, and the centre did not hold. And more so, this is the hypothesis that we're going to accept or reject, that the Freedom Front Plus is an avatar, a signifier, a placeholder for white voters' interests, and the EFF is a vehicle for black voters' interests. Okay, so, I'm not going to sustain the suspense anymore. I reject this hypothesis. We'll talk about it. Now, I don't think I'm the only one at the table. What do I mean? Specifically that I don't think it's useful to talk about identity and identity politics in racial terms, and possibly not even in broad gender terms, possibly a little bit in terms of class and income terms. And there is evidence to support the contentions made by my co-panelists. It's fatuous, it's reductionist to talk about the black vote when you're talking about 80% of the country. Even to talk about the white vote in terms of the Freedom Front Plus. Here's something interesting. I wish I'd had the map up, but I don't. I only gave you the old maps. The Freedom Front Plus didn't just grow among white voters. Predominantly, yes, but there were pockets of growth where the Freedom Front Plus didn't just take support away from the DA, but they took support away from COPE. And in predominantly coloured wards, in Ward 3 of Karoo-Hoogland, which is Northern Cape bordering on the Western Cape, other areas of the Northern Cape, parts of the Eastern Cape and parts of the Western Cape as well. So that just degrades and breaks down the racial lens and the race narrative a little more. If coloured voters, if some coloured voters and some white voters were voting for the Freedom Front Plus, why were they voting for the Freedom Front Plus? If it wasn't just on the basis of race and race solidarity. There are a couple of hypotheses that we can float. It was possibly again on the basis of narrow economic interests, personal interests. There is an intersection of support and interest groups between the Freedom Front Plus, AfriForum and Solidariteit, which is the trade union umbrella, which mostly has as a support white and coloured voters. There may have also, if it wasn't just economic and socio-economic interest, it may have been ideological, for want of a better word, conservative voters, conservative interests, social conservative interests that were supported maybe best by voting for the Freedom Front Plus. And possibly again by voters who were erstwhile DA supporters but felt alienated from the party that had become a version of the ANC. A couple more interesting points. In my neck of the woods back home, in the Jewish ghetto, there's a lot of support for the ACDP. Because for a very small, homogeneous group of voters, Jewish voters in Johannesburg, there's a single issue that's important to them, and that's namely, how much support for Israel does this particular party have? So it's the ACDP, it's the IFP, and probably in second or third place, depending on who you speak to, the DA. Why does a minority of African American voters vote for the Republican Party? Why does the journalist Charles Blow say, if I look at my mother and women like her who grew up and who still live in rural, racially divisive southern states, where the realities of racism and Jim Crow are maybe 1 or 2 generations removed, why do so many African American women, specifically women, vote for the Republican Party? It's only 5, maybe 10% of all African Americans, female African Americans in the US, but why should there be any votes for the Republican Party? And it's the single issue of abortion rights. So it's that aspect of your identity, but it's not the aspect of your identity that you might think. It's not based on race. It's not based on gender. It's based on sociological or religious interests. In theory, under our proportional representation system, there should be a variety of party support. There should be a number of parties that make it into the national assembly, more so than in the United States or in the UK, where a plurality first past the post system means that sometimes people will aggregate and coagulate with the Republicans or the Democrats, or Labour or the Liberal Democrats in the UK, because of tangential issues, but not because there's a party that fits their needs specifically. The PL system should lead to more choices. What have we seen historically over the last 25 years in South Africa? The parties that have appealed on a narrow cultural, language, geographical basis have come and gone. Does anyone remember the United Christian Democratic Party? The neo-Mangope Party of the Northwest? Anybody? Does anyone remember the Minority Front? Okay, let's go through the list. Does anyone remember the National Freedom Party? Okay, they're still around. Does everyone remember the United Democratic Party? Or the United Democratic Movement? Okay. All these parties, including the Inkatha Freedom Party, what they have in common is support that is largely geographically concentrated, that appeals on the basis or the intersection of language, of geography, of a shared culture or a shared history. And by and large, those parties have done badly and continue to do badly. There was an explosion in these parties in the 1999 national provincial elections. That's when the UCDP first appeared. That's when there was growth. But those parties have all wilted and faded away. The parties which have done well, again, have been the Freedom Front Plus and the EFF. And what's interesting, what we've seen in these recent elections, in contrast to the 2014 elections, is that the EFF support has broadened. The EFF has grown in places in Mpumalanga and KZN where home language is not Sesotho, Sepedi and Setswana. And this was already a very sensitive and tricky contention or series of dots to connect in 2014 to say that the EFF support was very narrowly confined to 4 provinces or to 3 language groups. Because language could be a proxy for so many things. It could be a proxy for economic migration from Limpopo into Gauteng, from the northwest into Gauteng. It doesn't necessarily mean that there is a group of voters who are wedded to a party because there's a common language that's shared. A more convincing narrative in terms of the EFF is that the party started out with a narrow geographic support which was confounded by economic migration patterns because of our history of economic migration and because of our economic path dependency. And the party has broken out of that narrow support base. It now has support of Siswati speakers in Mpumalanga and isiZulu speakers in KZN. And its support has broadly grown across all 9 provinces. I wrote an article a couple of months ago about Al-Jama. Al-Jama is a party which appeals on a narrow basis of identity. But it doesn't necessarily appeal geographically on the basis of language, or even, to misquote and to abuse Malcolm X, on the basis of race or population group, whatever we want to label. Al-Jama is a party which appeals to Muslim voters. Not all Muslim voters, otherwise they have a lot more seats in the National Assembly. But it is a party which has got a clearly defined mandate, which is namely to promote the interests of a religious minority, to champion those rights. It has grown incrementally, it has grown steadily, sometimes it's grown very modestly. It grew by something like 70 votes between 2009 and 2014. That's not sterling growth. But in the context of lower turnouts, in the context of widespread and growing voter apathy, these ebbs and flows in terms of single interest, single seat parties, it's hard to tell where they will go in 2024 and beyond. But the probability is that these small parties will do better than they have in the past. They won't all remain, but there will probably be a growth in the number of these parties, given our electoral system, given the fact that the overall pie is shrinking, and that the little pieces that narrowly defined, narrowly focused parties can garner will end up being a larger proportion of the smaller pie. Conclusions. Stratification by race is problematic, as we said before, to cast an umbrella on 80% of the population, the black African, even 10% of the population, the colored vote, the white vote. It's a bit lazy. It's inaccurate. We contain multitudes. Parties that appeal to religion, to ideology, to economic interests, to other secular ideological interests, parties that are geographically dispersed, given our electoral system, are more likely to do better. Compare that map of the Freedom Front Plus. The party now has representation in 8 out of 9 provinces, which it's never had before. And given the actual numbers of votes, what the Freedom Front Plus has done in 2019 is basically to press reset and go back to its position in 1994. It is within 10,000 votes of where it was in 1994. Depending on how you feel about the party, you'd say that only KZN is missing the train, or maybe KZN voters are the only ones smart enough to reject the party. Thank you for coming to my TED.
So thank you very much to all 3 speakers. I want to pose a question before we open to the audience. The second part of the theme is, and perhaps we can make it up on the hoof, but maybe we can start with Reza. So what are the implications for contemporary South Africa of what's emerged in our discussions and voting patterns if race isn't the defining line of identity?
Contemporary South Africa is fracturing. The working class is moving hard to the left. They're affluent, and just as a matter of fact, of people who voted for the DA, 30% don't like the DA. They just don't like the ANC and the EFF even more. It was that portion that fractured off to the FF+. There are reasons for these things. South Africa is in for a rough time. Consider this. Christine Lagarde, the chair of the chief of the IMF, International Monetary Fund, she said there's the largest credit bubble in human history. When it bursts, she used the word when, that's a temporal presupposition, it will be a devastating event. And South Africa right now is not in a position to be able to weather that kind of event. A 2008 event, except even bigger. The working class, the downward social mobility. Do you know there was this dream once of a better life for all? It's evaporated. And that's the truth of the matter. So in the SONA, State of the Nation address, this business of talking about what happened 106 years ago, this business of building a new city and a bullet train to link Johannesburg with Cape Town, how do you think the vast majority responded to that? They got serious issues right now. Need to earn a livelihood. So what we expect to see going forward is less and less youth, and it isn't apathy. Youth are not apathetic. They are alienated. So South Africa is in for a rough time going forward. The future isn't what it used to be.
Sanusha?
I think it's something we have to be more aware of now than ever before, and that is the shift between the rural and the urban. One of the things I picked up from Paul's presentation is if you take the IFP in KZN, it's very rural-based, northern KwaZulu-Natal, and that concentration. I mean, there's been different interpretations of it because there's also the question of Nkansha being in the heartland of the IFP territory, so to speak. And I think for me, the contemporary is the indicator that we're moving very fast to people moving to urban centers because they're looking for the jobs. But taking Reza's point about by 2029, you're going to create 2 million jobs when the youth population is going to be around about 6 million or 10 million, depending on population dynamics. This is the pressure that we're going to face. So if more people are not going to come out to register, they feel alienated. Apathy is going to, I mean, not apathy, maybe alienation, but people are going to feel as if, what's the value of the vote? So I think for me, if we are to look at what are the implications of this, whether it's about how this identity is informed or whether we call it identity in the very broad sense of the definition of the term, I think the bigger challenge is understanding what's going to happen to the structural conditions in society, informed by the fact that we can't ignore the global impact of trade wars and investments are coming here. And I hate to say this, but I think we can't keep making this argument that we're a gateway to where, to what, for what purpose. There's a section of the African continent that's moving very fast in terms of development aid, ports and facilitation of all kinds of economic infrastructure. What is our attractiveness to create that? And I think that's going to be the bigger challenge. And of course, the inherent question in all of this is how much more alienated people feel that, a million jobs, a million homes at peace never really materialized from 94.
Paul, can I ask you something slightly different? Are people turning away from the state?
I just want to understand the question. So when you say turning away from the state,
Not voting as an exercise of shifting, turning your back.
yes. The simple short answer. This was the second time in our democratic history that the number of voters was lower than the previous election. The other time was 1999, and that was a bit of an anomaly because 94 was so high. It was the dawn of democracy. So voter apathy is growing. Young voters are registered in lower numbers for a number of factors, a number of reasons. The IEC has expended a lot of resources and time on getting voter addresses right because of the Concord Directive, but it's been a perfect storm. The IEC's had its hands full. People are disillusioned. Work done by youth-focused NGOs and organizations like Youth Lab have shown exactly what Reza says, that the youth are alienated. They're angry. They want things like direct representation. They don't like the PR system. Like, how do I hold my councillor or my representative accountable? The jobs aren't materialized. We are in grave danger of facing in 10 or 15 years a generational split where the generation that remembers life before 94, that votes, as an article of faith, that votes because they have a personal history and a direct awareness of how valuable the vote is, they will pass on and the younger cohorts won't be voting anymore. And yeah.
On that note, we open the floor. So if anyone's got questions, there's a roving mic out there. Myra, there's one there, and then we have two here. Please identify yourself.
Yeah, my name is Khan. I spent 12 years living in Australia and then came back to South Africa in 93. And I can tell you now, Australia is in a worse position than we are today. So you better get a wake up in terms of what's happening globally. I think if you go to, and you can go and look at housing crisis and the kind of economic challenges that they're facing. I'd like to get a better understanding. I mean, I think South Africa is too focused on its internal issues and not looking at what's coming at it. So if you look at websites like the Population Reference Bureau and the forecast where populations will be in 2050, where India will be the largest, China the second, and Nigeria the third largest country in the world. We are not connecting those opportunities. You know, we're so focused on race, and I hear you say it's not, we are. We are very focused on race, where I come from, what my immediate needs are and interests are. And I think the class issues are popping in. I mean, there are people that have done well through the 94 change, and they are not looking back, and they're not interested in supporting any people that are need a lift, an uplift. Okay, so those are the real issues that I think we need to deal with. I do think that we have some levers left. I think the country is too small. I think we're going to have another 100 million people in South Africa. Okay, I mean, and that will change the dynamics, like it's changed the dynamics for Australia. They haven't always made use of it, but it's also changed the dynamics for the US. And I think the real next round is there won't be a middle class. There won't be fiat currencies. I mean, and young people understand that. I mean, I have a young son who's just left the country. Just told me one day, he said, I've taken my bags, thanks for giving me some money, I'm not coming back, I'll call you when I need you. So the globalization and now people can work anywhere in the world has changed the whole dynamic. So these political parties are not offering those kind of exciting opportunities that the globe is offering, you know, and people are seeing that. So why would you stay and why would you want to be part of a country that's really not going anywhere unless you create huge excitement? And I'm not sure that a new city and a bullet train is the excitement that young people want. They are digital, they don't need to leave home, you know, they don't need to be on a bullet train to get from Cape Town to Johannesburg to do business. So that's kind of the outlook I think we are missing as a nation.
Thank you, and
I think I don't need a mic. Okay, sure. All right. My name is Basha. I founded a non-profit organization called Women in the Young. So over a couple of years, almost 12 years now,
we've practically never received support from government. And what do I mean when I say support from government? First of all, the work that we do is for poverty alleviation. We try and target women within certain communities that are adversely poor. I'm not talking about a typical shack that has a DSTV and the children wearing Nike tattoos. Not that. I'm simply talking about women that would go to sleep and not have food and not have anything to provide for their children as well. Those are the kind of households that we represent. And apart from that, we are aware that a lot of women are living with terminal illnesses. They are disabled. So we have a category of women that we're trying to support, with which politics doesn't really, from my personal opinion, doesn't care about those marginalized women. So over the years, I'm also statistically a person that never voted twice in a row. Solemnly, because in the Western Cape, when we lobbied the city of Cape Town and the DA itself to help us with the work that we were doing, and we were not looking particularly for funding, we were particularly looking for partnerships because of the number of cases that we receive. It's got nothing to do even about funding. So we were looking for the ruling party in the province to help us with housing, because some of these women were living not even in proper shacks. They were literally under plastic bags with children. So we were trying to make sure that we relocate any mother with a child under the ages of 6, and we place them in a proper, humane space where they can raise their children. And obviously register them in the process for birth records and get them into the social welfare system. We have dismally failed. So I have also been recruited by political organizations to participate in a whole lot of nonsense without considering the fact that people are poor. And the debate has been, who is poor? I think it's actually a very offensive question to ask who is poor in South Africa when we still have children in provincial hospitals with a whole lot of other sicknesses as a result of malnutrition. And so the government asks who is poor, yet statistically they have children that die of poverty, children that are living with sicknesses as a result of poverty. So that has been a dilemma for us. So that is the reason why I never voted, because with whichever angle we tried to approach the state, we just never received support. All they said was that compliance. What is compliance? I'm a registered nurse, so I've never received any funding from the government. I had to work to get my degree. So all the other people that we work with are also professionals. We have social workers, we have medical doctors, we have a multidisciplinary team that is competent enough to do the work that we do. And yet, even under those circumstances, the state was not in a position to give us proper support. So you then ask the question, why vote?
So we've spoken about the fact that people did not go out to vote because they are disenchanted with politics or disenchanted with the state's ability to deliver. What is the evidence, or what evidence are you aware of regarding whether people are disenchanted with the constitutional structure of South Africa and the negotiated settlement of South Africa, not just the political parties or the individual in the parties or the electoral system directly? I mean, are we able to pass out what exactly they're rejecting? Because the people who voted for Brexit were not necessarily rejecting the EU. They may have been rejecting Cameron, which I completely can relate to.
Yeah, they're not here, but they'd be very instructive. I wish I could put them up. If we just look at turnout in this election and the previous one, there's some very striking things. There are, on a provincial level, there are provinces where turnout's high. Those are largely urbanized provinces. That's Gauteng, that's Western Cape, and it's urban areas and other provinces. There are provinces where turnout has fallen consistently and steadily over 10, 15 years, namely Northwest and Limpopo, and now increasingly the Free State. Those are all provinces and areas, and it's not the whole province, but it's certain areas. So if you look at the map, you might see turnout is high in this ward and it's low in that. So maybe maybe that voting station was busy, so you popped over to the one next door because you can do that. But when you have whole areas, whole swathes of the map where turnout is significantly lower or higher, there is a story. Specific areas around Fulwani, the northeastern parts of Limpopo, turnout has been consistently low and been getting worse over the last 2 electoral cycles. The eastern parts of the Eastern Cape, the parts of the northwest which are increasingly rural or are in municipalities where service delivery has been bad. There were only 3 or 4 wards in the whole of Gauteng where turnout was significantly bad. Not just bad relative to the rest of the province, because the province, as we said, if turnout this election was 65% on average, turnout across the whole of the Gauteng province was still significantly higher. It was closer to 70%. But there were wards where turnout was even below 65%. Where were those wards? Berea, Hillbrow, and Diepsloot, where service delivery is bad and is getting worse. So, okay, that's indirect evidence, but it's pretty, and circumstantial, but it's pretty convincing.
Reza, do you want to respond to some of that?
So we measure awareness of the Constitution. So 2 years ago, we did a very large study for the Foundation of Human Rights. And then the South African Citizens Survey continued to track the core indicator of, are you aware of the Constitution? Only half of South Africans are aware of the Constitution. And significantly less than that have read or know about the Bill of Rights. What South Africans are experts on is the lived circumstances. Things like the Constitution. Well, we also have been tracking trust in the Constitutional Court. For the beginning of measurement in 2015, trust in the Constitutional Court was about just over 60%. But let's understand what people, when they hear the word Constitutional Court, they don't know the difference between a magistrate's court, a high court, and a constitutional court. They just hear the word court. When they hear Constitution, well, in the media they was talking about changing the Constitution. And a lot of people sense this is not a good thing. And we see trust in the Constitutional Court, like trust in all the institutions of democracy during the end of the Zuma period, collapsing. So that helps us understand how South Africans view the Constitution, the Constitutional Court, and the Bill of Rights. And just one last point. There's only 2 fully protected rights in the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, 1996. Only 2. The right to life and the right to dignity. Consider, women are the most vulnerable, especially impoverished women. Living under a plastic bag, how dignified is that? And the Constitution is supposed to protect this as a fully protected right. No. This constitutional democracy is in serious trouble.
Sanusha, respond to them. We'll do one round of questions and then some conclusions.
Thank you, Zora. Just, on the point of globalization, I think we've got to be very careful in how we interpret globalization. Because we tend to assume that globalization is about opening up the market, opening up the border, creating this kind of trajectory around how people can engage and move. Something very interesting is happening in the world today, in the sense that globalization is also about limiting the space and the access to the space. And if you take the G20 right now, this weekend, in Japan, when the G20 is being hosted by the Japanese government as the current presidency of the G20, we've seen how donors have shifted the discussion around migration policy. And one of the dynamics of that is to keep people within their space, within the economic borders, because the pressure of migration on the established economies is much greater. And I suspect that we have to be very careful in in assuming that globalization gives us that kind of opportunity. And there's a very good TED talk, just to take your point of view, written by an academic called Guy Stanley, who talks about, in his book called The Precariat, that in every society there is the alienated section of the population who know no loyalty, but are very, very important in terms of what happens to the future of that society. Whether you're talking about South Africa, you're talking about Nigeria, you're talking about Kenya, or you're talking about the US of A. And I think we've got to be realizing that precariat that can also be educated, but still remain on the margins and be alienated.
Thank you. We've got a question here. Do we have any more questions? We do one more round. Analyst?
I'm in the wine business, and we run a company that we mainly export internationally. And so in traveling, you get a really an idea and an observation of what is sort of happening in dynamics in cities in America or the UK, Europe. And while watching your observation, if you're really talking about money, and I'm a Democrat, I love the color of money. In God we trust. I'm 100% into that. And if you look at the money in South Africa, it's in Stellenbosch and it's in Sandton. Across the road in Stellenbosch, you've got high money and the right wing. Using your term, the DA will say, and a lot of my friends with a shitload of money will say, high money is not my problem. It's the ANC. You go to Sandton, across the road is Alexandra. It's like you don't see it. The money, not my problem. My problem is looking after shareholders. And if you go, and I had the misfortune, I'm a Spurs supporter, of watching Burnley beat Spurs in Burnley. But when I was in Burnley, the cotton mills have gone, globalization has taken over. You get to London and you ask someone, how do you feel about Burnley? They say, where is it? And that, unfortunately, is happening around the world. Companies, when Mr. Trump gives his lovely rebates in terms of tax, it's about the money goes to shareholders, quite rightly so. And so what you're having is this disbursement of wealth where people in London with good jobs don't really give it what's happening up north. It's not really important. And then the same goes inside. It's not my problem. My problem is to look after shareholders. And unfortunately, what you've got is people voting for Trump out of sheer exhaustion. You've got people voting for Brexit. They know it's going to be a disaster. And you've got people that are voting for EFF. And in fact, when I listened to the debate on the EFF last night about how this country should be run in terms of just nationalise everything, the people voting for the EFF believing that, they against corruption won't find any benefits if the EFF get into power. And that's my biggest worry. That if you look at nationalisation in Italy and Spain, that if these guys got into power, they'd be actually worse off. And that's just my observation.
Ernest, and then I'm going to give our speakers about 2 to 3 minutes to wrap up, perhaps respond to some of the questions that have come out, and then we can have something to eat and drink and have an informal conversation afterwards.
Thank you for the speakers and the organization. Personally, I'm from Rwanda originally, and I've been having a cough. I'm originally from Rwanda, and I'm always interested in forward solutions and all of those. I'm lucky I have a job with the City of Cape Town. I'm in planning. And I think my observation for my years that I've been in the country is that I've been here for almost 20 years, so those are 2 decades. and I have a fair knowledge about what South Africa goes through, what it has gone through. I think for me, my observation goes back to the mindset of our people, because we feel we are entitled of some kind of, we have some entitlement. After the 1994, there were many promises that were made. However, for me, that freedom that was obtained, people did not go forward. So they felt like the government must do this and this and that. And people, probably the mindset should shift to say, look, I'm going to the university. I have people that we went together at the university, but if you ask me where they are, I won't be able to tell you. Because sometimes I don't know whether it's the loss of focus or is thinking somebody else is going to do this and that. But for me, personally, even when you look at the manifesto, so there is somebody else to be blamed. What is you as an individual, what is your part in trying to come with a solution for future generations to come? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Paul, let's start with you. Any responses to some of the inputs? These weren't necessarily questions, it was comment.
I'd like to run, sorry, also a frog. I'd like to run with the comments by the second to last speaker, and I think it just to touch on the success of Trump and Brexit and to tie into this idea of identity politics. If there's identity politics at work, to me it seems that the stratification, if anything, is on the basis of age. What Trump and Brexit have in common is they seem to be the politics of nostalgia. There's an appeal to a better time or a restoration of a better time. Because globally we're going through a terrible time, economically. And in South Africa it's worse, because there is a social, economic and a developmental deficit from apartheid which got worse than we thought it would have undeserved. I wish I could offer something more cheery and more optimistic and reassure the previous speaker, but I'm an economist by training, so my job is not to make you happy. My job is actually to make you miserable. Apologies. But in all honesty, things are bleak. We are looking, as we said before, at the real prospect that there is going to be a missing, or a couple of missing age cohorts, if there's no way to ignite younger voters, to energize them, or to make them interested in politics. And the evidence suggests that, and this is a global trend, that older voters are more likely to vote and more likely to be engaged. But it's also a habit, like going to gym, exercising your democratic muscles. If you don't vote, you will be less likely to vote next time. If you don't register, you may be less likely to register next time. We are caught in a very bad spiral. And in terms of identity politics, the appeal of things like Make America Great Again or Brexit, apart from an appeal to nostalgia, the politicians and the parties that are doing well globally are appealing to voters' fears. There's a negative appeal. And the appeals all seem to be negative. Reza touched on what we call negative partisanship. I'm voting for the DA because they're not the ANC or the EFF. Or in colloquial terms, I'm going to this synagogue because I'm definitely not going to that synagogue. I will never pray there. The joke, you have to walk past at least two before you get to the one that you really like. And I guess that's the concern. I wish I could give you better news. And to close off in terms of the identity politics, it's not going to be the obvious things we talk about. The parties that are going to win and do well in the future in South Africa, I don't think are going to be the ones that appeal on the basis of race. They will be the ones that appeal on the basis of socio-economic conditions and lived conditions. And they will be the ones that appeal to maybe more narrow, constructed parts of our identity, because we have multiple facets to identities. And I think that's what we need to, in terms of the analysis and, if you want to start a party and do well in the next 5 or 10 years. I think those are the trends to watch out for.
Thank you, Paul. Sanusha?
Yeah, I mean, just to take off from where Paul spoke about it, I mean, I think the idea of what's happening in, not just in the UK or in the US, but look at Brazil. I think Brazil is an important example of a country where the fear of what was being exposed through the Kawa scandal and so forth, corruption again, played into not just voter fear, but also the fact, I think, of sharing the spoils. We don't want to share the spoils anymore. We don't want to expand the spoils anymore. And that's the inequality of the question of identity politics. How do I protect what little I have so I don't share it? I think it was a Financial Times article where it was a very polemical article talking about what's the use of going to Disney World today if I can go to Disney World and my maid can also go to Disney World? And I think that was a very interesting way even to capture what's happening globally about what's a crisis in terms of our domestic economy. And that's because it's much more endemic, it's much more embedded, it's much more felt in realistic terms when people have had bad lived experiences, where they don't get access, where they are still trying for the access, and where there's the inequality that also sets into that space. And that inequality, we're seeing it around the world. We're seeing it with regard to how it's playing in terms of whether we're protecting it through voting for parties that protect this interest that we have. We don't want to share it. And I think for me, that's going to become more intense, more acute in terms of what your point you made about the corporate's accountability to shareholders, but not just to shareholders, to protecting what is a very small wealth base. And if you think about what CEOs are earning in terms of bonuses and what the percentages in terms of what they're getting, in my mind, it's inconceivable, the numbers. I can't put my head around some of these. There's 200, 3,000% increases in bonuses when people are starving and essentially living in this world where it's completely characterized by an inequality that is widening as opposed to actually reducing whether we achieve Agenda 2030 or not. And I think that for me is going to become the key question in terms of how do we go forward. What we didn't speak about, which we should have, is the fact that as much as we talk about the working class moving towards the left, is the middle class moving somewhere else? I mean, where are they going in terms of their incomes? How do they protect it? And again, do we think about these things in terms of the South African context and the fact that in order to achieve even a modicum of what we have to achieve, we can't keep going on with the current practices of policy.
Thank you, Sanusha. Reza?
Money knows no class. Money knows no race. Money knows no religion. Money knows no ethnicity. It knows no creed. Money knows itself. A billionaire, whether he's black, white, Indian, American, British, it doesn't matter. Money knows itself. As my colleague, I'm also trained in economics. Let me tell you what's happening in the world economy right now. It's going to contract this year by, well, some estimates, IMF estimate, 40% GDP growth. They're knocking off. There's belligerence, geopolitics, there's belligerence, there's trade war. The instigator is, the belligerent is the United States. Directed at the EU, directed at China. Trade is the dynamo of the world economy, and that is shrinking. There are some really hard realities to face. South Africa, in comparison to the EU, US, and Chinese economy, if we were to put all their GDPs together, US is a $19.5 trillion economy. South Africa is only a $350 billion economy. As a percentage of the three, we are 0.8%. A leaf in the wind, and let's just say the southeast. Now, I was discussing a matter with a very learned colleague about industrial policy in China. Because remember, our issue is jobs. And the industrial policy in China, in the late 80s, mid-80s, they became the world's sweatshop. That's what they were. Ultra-exploited labor. So what did capital do? Move significant amounts of production to China. And what was the result? A lot of money. The billionaires were formed in China. The billionaires got richer in the US. That's a matter of fact. Over the last 3 decades, what has China done? Well, if we look at the industrial policy now, 30 years later, they're moving up the value chain. Their 2025 policy, cellular, 5G, biotechnology, that's what they intend to, AI, robotics, that's where they intend to focus. Chinese billionaires have no difference from South African billionaires. Same people. How do we solve the unemployment crisis in South Africa? President Ramaphosa talks about immediately jumping to the high value chain. He does. Manufacturing of minerals, the production of microchips. Seriously? To create jobs? There's only one real way to create jobs in South Africa. Turn it into the sweatshop of the world. Bangladesh. Compete. Bring that labor market all the way to its knees. Ultra exploitation. Now the question is, do you think South Africans will accept that? Do you think the youth will accept that? No, no, no. Not given our history. This is likely to lead to conflict with state. Oh, you know, it's what I find fascinating is the ANC talks about another 25 years in power. Do you really think they have another 25 years in power? Thank you.
On that rather bleak note, I have nothing else to offer you but some food and drink. So please enjoy. Let's have discussions. Let's look for the sort of silver lining. I know it's tough times, but there has to be a silver lining. There must. Let's create a silver lining. So thank you very much. And I want to thank our 3 speakers, Paul Berkowitz, Sanusha, Naidu, and Reza. Omar, thank you very much. It's a hard conversation, but these are hard times that require us to take off the blinkers and confront our realities, and that's where we need to be. And I want to thank Megan and Myra and colleagues from Kas for the admin support. Thank you very much. Folks, there's food. Enjoy. Thank you.